A little bit. Want to turn it down a little bit?
All right. Good evening. I'm going to call to order the meeting of the City of Campbell Planning Commission for January 23rd, 2024. Can we have a roll call vote? Commissioner Fields? Present. Commissioner Majewski?
Present.
Commissioner Ostrowski? Commissioner Buckbinder?
Present.
Commissioner Craig?
Here.
Vice Chair Camcar?
Here.
Chair Scissor? Here. Okay, thank you. I remember this time. My name is Alan Zisser, and I'm the chair of the Planning Commission. Let's go to the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes of January 9th? Anybody have any corrections? Anybody? Do I have a motion?
I'll move approval of the January 9th minutes.
Second?
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Cray, second by Commissioner Camcar. We have a vote. Commissioner Fields?
Abstain.
Commissioner Majewski?
Aye.
Commissioner Buckbinder?
Abstain.
Commissioner Cray?
Aye.
Vice Chair Camcar?
Aye.
Chair Scissor? Aye. Okay. That passes. Communications, Director Eastwood, any communications or agenda modifications?
Yes, Chair Zisser, honorable commissioners, you have received this about an hour ago. It's a letter related to item 5 on your agenda. We've distributed hard copies. It's also emailed to you from related and concerning item 5. Agenda modifications, postponements or other communication.
Is PATH separate? I have a related letter and a letter from PATH.
They're 2 separate letters.
All right. And, okay.
I think the relevance is that they're both working on the Winchester development, or by Winchester Station with VTA.
Okay. We don't need to read these into the minutes or anything, right? They're available. Okay. So oral requests, open for oral requests. This is a point in our meeting where any member of the public may address the commission on an item that is not on the agenda. You may speak up to 5 minutes, but the planning commission may not take any action today. Is there anybody who'd like to speak in the chamber or online? Do you have anybody? Not on the agenda? Ken? No? Okay. Since there's nobody interested in speaking, I'll close the oral requests. Okay, so we'll move to the meeting agenda. Before we start regular meeting agenda items, I want to provide some information on how we'll be conducting the meeting for each item. Each item I will first introduce the item and then ask for a staff presentation, after which the commissioners may have some questions for staff. After that, we'll open the public hearing, first ask for the applicant to speak if applicable and is available, followed by any other members of the public who wish to speak on that agenda item. We will first have any public speakers physically present speak, and then anyone attending via Zoom. Members of the Planning Commission may have questions for the applicant or any of the public speakers. Once we've received all public testimony, we'll close the public hearing, and the commission will then have discussion and then a motion and decision based on the nature of the item. Okay, before we start on the items, do any of the commissioners have any disclosures regarding the items tonight? Mr. Camcar.
I visited the location for item number 3.
Anybody else?
Yeah, and I visited 3 and 2 locations to talk to everybody.
Okay. All right.
Chair, my apologies. Our staff planner for item number 2 is having challenges getting online. Respectfully request the commission is okay with it to switch the order of items 3 and 2. And 3 go first.
Okay, let's begin with item 3. With item 3. Excuse me. Item 3 is PLN 2021-215-946 South McClincy Lane. It's a continued public hearing to consider the request of Danny Kabza on behalf of Terra Firma Development Holdings LLC to allow construction of an approximately 10,250 square foot industrial warehouse building with an exception to the side setback requirement on property located at 946 South McClincy Lane. The application under consideration is a site and architectural review permit, file number PLN 2021-215. Staff is recommending that this item be deemed categorically exempt under SEQA. Planning Commission action is final unless appealed in writing to the city clerk within 10 calendar days. Our project planner on this is Daniel Falma. Daniel?
Good evening. The item before you is a sign architectural review permit for property located at 946 South McClincy Lane. This is an approximately half-acre property located on McClincy north of Purdner Avenue within the light industrial zoning and general plan district. It is surrounded by industrial properties to the north, south, and west, and single-family residential to the east, as shown on the map. The site is currently approved as a paved area as a private parking lot or storage facility. The applicant's proposal is for construction of a 10,255 square foot industrial building with a side setback exception. The building is proposed at a 22-foot height that's measured to the roof surface, where the zoning district would otherwise allow a 45-foot height maximum. The parapet height, basically the portion of the building that surrounds the roof, an additional 4 feet to reach a height of 26 feet. The building is proposed at 10-foot setbacks at both the front and rear, and it includes an exception to the interior side setback to the north. Ordinarily, a 5-foot setback is required. However, as discussed in your staff report, and as we'll discuss more in a moment, the code does allow an exception down to 0 feet. 14 parking stalls are required under AB 2097. No parking is required, even though this project site is physically separated from the light rail station by Highway 17. AB 2097 looks at proximity to transit just as the crow flies. Here we have the site plan. The warehouse building is basically pushed up to the property line at the north as discussed, and that's the side setback exception. The back of the property is encumbered by a 10-foot easement owned by the Santa Clara County Water District, commonly known as Valley Water. So this application had been previously scheduled for the prior hearing and was continued to allow staff to work with Valley Water. So it's noted in your staff report, the conditions of approval do give requirements for the applicant to secure a separate encroachment permit from Valley Water. Due to the easement, that area is largely limited to landscaping and a little bit of paving with the parking stalls that are shown inside it. The parking lot incorporates a drive aisle, parking stalls, a trash enclosure, stormwater management facility here on private property. And then offsite, the city is also requiring construction of a new sidewalk and landscaping strip, and also offsite stormwater treatment. In terms of design, this is a fairly straightforward purpose-built flat roof structure, CMU block with plastered walls and Sherwin-Williams paint colors shown here in the partial exhibit at the bottom right. So in terms of review considerations, first up, the reduced setback. So this is a relatively new requirement that the city adopted last year. So this allows a reduction to that setback to 0 when the Planning Commission finds certain things to be true. That includes that the building is no taller than 30 feet as measured to the parapet. So that's a more restrictive height limitation than otherwise would apply to a building within the zoning district. It's a building of 1 story, and it only allows this when that side of the building is adjacent to a non-residential use. And additionally, the building also is limited to general industrial use, specifically manufacturing, processing, warehouse, storage, assembly, and fabrication. So for instance, in the future, the site could not be used for auto body repair, for example. And in terms of the findings for a sign architecture review permit, the Planning Commission must find that the project is consistent with the general plan. Staff
believes it is, as discussed in the staff report. That it's also consistent with any design guidelines or master plan requirements, which do not apply. The city has not adopted any industrial design guidelines, and the site is not within the boundaries of the master or neighborhood plan. And then lastly, the application would aid in the harmonious development of the immediate vicinity. Now, this ties into the correspondence that you did receive that was provided as a desk item yesterday. So staff did receive several emails from neighbors regarding the application. Specifically, these neighbors are located at, apologies, it's like a slide of mine disappeared or did not sync. The back of the project site does abut several residential properties. And so there is some consideration of how this building would impact those homeowners. So as with many applications, it is a balancing act between the applicant's right to develop and the impact it can have on those homeowners. So as staff did indicate, I mean, the general thrust of the general plan is to see the incremental development of the McGlinchey area with new clean buildings. There's a lot of legacy development out there that's loud, dirty, noisy, and this would not be that. But it does have an impact on those residents where you would have a 26-foot tall wall and a 10-foot setback from those backyards. Now, the building is compliant with that 10-foot setback. That is the easement area. However, those are minimum standards. So if the planning commission feels that a greater setback is warranted in order for you to affirmatively establish the finding that the project would aid in the harmonious development of the immediate vicinity, that is within your ability to do so. And with that, staff recommends the planning commission approve the site architecture review permit. Thank you.
Okay. We'll open it up for questions by the commission. We start on this side. Adam?
Could you clarify why this is coming before planning commission? It's not a conditional use permit. What triggers a site and architectural review that needs our discretion?
There's a little nuance with existing buildings, but construction of any brand new non-residential building always requires planning commission.
Thank you. That clears that up.
Yeah, Daniel, thank you, Chair. I was surprised on that. So on the setback allowance, that's just something that we've allowed since a year ago.
For the interior side setback, yes.
Because I was going to ask you, because I saw in the report that you said that so you can allow less than 5 feet if the height's less than 30 feet, including the parapet, et cetera, et cetera. But I was just wondering, so I guess it hasn't come up, but I was wondering how often we've allowed 0 setback.
You actually allowed 0 on a building across the street last year.
Just last year. Okay.
Coincidence, but the same applicant.
That's the only one you can remember.
I
guess I'm trying to think
Not
of-
a lot of development out there.
Yeah, but I mean, anywhere in the city I'm talking about, because I'm just trying to get the difference between a 1 foot setback versus a 0 foot setback. Seems like even that's something that
Well,
a little bit of a breeze. That just seems like it's just less density, less possibilities of problems. But
Well, oftentimes the challenge that we've seen is when you have such a limited setback, that space is not functional at all. So it tends to collect debris and create nuisance activity. So actually having a building right up against a property line really literally removes any possibility of any activity occurring in that.
that's that point even better. And the property owner to the north with the 0 setback hasn't complained or said.
They are also an industrial property, of course.
And then I was going to ask you about the harmonious development. You explained that, so that was good. So we'll discuss that. Is any lighting on that on the resident side, on that side of the building? Any lighting issues for the residents on Dallas Drive?
One of these slides did sync correctly. So the building that would face those residences is the east elevation. So that's the one on the right side. So you basically have mostly a wall, and there is a small sconce light shown here below the canopy. You have 2 storefront windows here.
Just those 2 windows now, okay. That helps on that. Yeah, I guess, and then, so there's a 10-foot setback in the rear, around that east side, as we mentioned, but, it just happens to be the water department easement, or is
It goes back
Do
a
they
long
go
time. It
together?
actually was an open air ditch during the agricultural era. And then in the, I believe the late seventies, as the water district was trying to modernize the water conveyance in the area, they actually put an underground pipe that connects to
Yeah.
park ponds. And so they actually they recorded an easement of 10 feet on either side along that property line. It actually affects its residents as well. And so the easement it's a little vague, but it precludes anything being built on it or planting of any trees that have roots that go down into it. But
Yeah,
it just
yeah.
allows some soft improvements such as landscape.
It also works as the 10-foot setback just by coincidence, which I mentioned because the water district makes a point of noting that it goes right up to their property and so it's in effect, in a way, almost a zero setback.
For that.
On that side too, for that reason.
I would also note that if it were not for the easement, the planning commission could actually reduce the rear setback all the way to zero as well.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I go next to each one.
Do you want to wait until the end? Yes. Chairman Fields. Commissioner Fields.
Promoted.
Yeah.
So I guess question, you mentioned sort of something we could consider is an increase in the setback. How much could we increase it by before you would essentially be unable to have a parking lot at all? Like right now, there's like the setback, and then there's a building, and then there's a parking lot. Like if we did 5 more feet, could you still have a parking lot, or are we already sort of coming up to like a physical limit?
Well, the building could not be shifted downward without compromising the drive aisle dimension. The drive aisle dimension right now is 25 feet, which is the minimum necessary for backing out vehicles.
Okay.
So if the commission didn't want to allow the reduction of the setback to the north, that would have the effect of reducing the building's width by 5 feet.
Oh, so you can't move the building, you would only be shrinking the building. Okay. Thank you. That everything else was asked already.
What are the, if you know this, the height measurements of the other industrial buildings nearby? Like,
I'm afraid I don't have it.
you think it'd be comparable, or is this like just completely?
I mean, there's some buildings that are taller. The new Trojan storage facility, I believe that's at the maximum height of 45 feet. So if you've gone out there, that's a pretty large building.
That's all for me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sure you've read the letter that the neighbors wrote regarding their site, and so on my visit out there, I looked, and there seems to be the neighbors' building is covering about half of one of the neighbors that wrote the letter's backyard. And then the parking lot of this development would sort of be there, and then the building portion of this development would get into the other neighbor's site, if you will. Am I correctly visualizing this?
I believe so. Let me, one moment here. This is the project site right here. So to the south, you actually do have a building that does back up to the rear property line. So this is how these neighbors would be impacted. So the building would be placed here, which would have the greatest impact to the homeowner at 299. the owner here at 291 would have a lesser impact because they would be abutting the parking lot portion of the project.
Okay, so thank you for bringing up this picture. And I don't know if Google plants those trees there or are they really there, you know, because sometimes in the modeling they.
No, those are really there.
Yeah.
Those are really there.
Yeah, you can see them
at the same
view. Yeah, right here.
Okay, so I was under the impression that you mentioned the Valley Water District has easement on both sides of the fence.
Yes.
And no planting is sort of allowed.
No. No, heavy
Park is,
yeah, the easement language talked about trees with deep roots. It's a bit vague what that means.
but can they put, for example, these trees in boxes? Like, you know, are they, you know, so the roots don't go in, but they still provide the screening, if you will, or provide the shade.
Yeah, that would likely be
That's
reasonable. I mean, arguably, really any improvement within the easement area is subject to water district approval.
Isn't there a landscape plan for along the fence? I was the impression there's trees planted.
It's more shrubs. The deep
Yeah.
trees, but
So there's shrubs rather than trees that would grow 15, 20, 25 feet.
which would be prohibited by the easement.
Okay, those are basically my questions. I will ask the rest from the applicant. Thank you.
So further, the location next to it to the south, there's an existing industrial building there.
Correct.
Do we know whether that's a 1-story or 2-story? The height is.
Appears to be a 2-story building.
And it goes back. How far
It's
back
actually
it goes?
That does step down.
If we were, if this were homes that were being put in, that were 2-story homes, which is 26 feet, it's basically a 2-story home. How close, how much of a setback would be allowed?
If this were a residential property at the same height, so again, we measure the height in this case of a flat roof building to the roof, not the parapet. So 22 feet, that would result in an 11-foot setback, half the wall height.
So it'd be nearly comparable, both in height and setback. Do we know, like you said, that there's the one particular residence that would be most affected by that, and the complaint in the letter, one of the complaints in the letter is the shadow. Is there going to be shadowing? It's like east, that's east and the west, and so I guess when the sun is setting, you're going to get shadow, right? Okay. All right. Okay, and so there isn't a possibility, instead of shrubbery, to put in some shallow rooted trees that would grow and be somewhat of a barrier. That's not a possibility.
I mean, that's unlikely. I mean, reading between the lines, I mean, it does appear the water district is quite sensitive about what happens within the easement. So that would ultimately be up to them. I suspect they would not be approving of any type of trees.
That would make a difference on the shadowing, but it would make a difference on the sighting site. Okay. And there's what's the height of the fence there? Is that a 6-foot fence?
I think it's a 6-foot fence. Right. Don't see that note on the plan.
It's 10 to 12 feet. All right. I guess I don't have any other questions. Anybody have any additional questions?
Yeah, do it.
Go ahead, Commissioner Gray.
Just, Daniel, just to be, so, McGlinchey has been an industrial zone for decades. And then, how long have we had the 30-foot height limit?
Well, there's a 45-foot overall height limit. There's a lower height limit applies, but only because the building is being placed against the north property. But otherwise, if it weren't for that, it
It
could
could
be
be, it could be up to 45. And we've had that 45 limit for a long time.
quite a long time. And bear in mind, too, 45 against to the roof surface, so you can also have a parapet. So the outer appearance of a building on McGlinchey could be 50 feet high.
Right, yeah, I think the parapet's 4 feet, but, and then, we had that 45 height limit as long as the houses, the residential district behind it has been.
I mean, I believe we've had the 45 feet height limit at least since the adoption of the code as it exists today in 2006. I'm not sure about before that.
Sure, the houses are older than that.
But it might have been more permissive in the past. Usually the standards have become more restrictive in large part.
Do we know whether that development, that residential development, came later after the industrial area?
This area actually was part of the county. So this was the Campbell Village annexation area. It was then annexed over 10 years ago.
Okay.
It's only recently been part of Campbell.
Go ahead.
You don't know of any view easements that the residential properties would have had?
I'm not aware of some.
Any more questions? No. Okay, I'm gonna close part of it and I'll open it up to the public. And do we have applicants who'd like to, the applicant like to speak? And then we'll get to other public speakers. Could you make sure we got this thing on and touch the round thing? Side, make it red, make it red. That's right. Could you state your name and any other material information?
My name's Brennan Pasek. I'm with Terra Firma. The property's been in my family since the early 70s. As you mentioned earlier, McGlinchey's been industrial for many decades. I can trace it back to the early 60s. The people who wrote these letters purchased their land after it was industrial. So they forfeit, in my opinion, the right to complain when there is future development. I do have a legally compliant code building that we're proposing. I could take this to 50 foot and I could take this all the way across the back property line. This is the least obtrusive yet economically viable building to build. There is the big 10 to 12 foot tall fence that my family put in years ago. That's what any questions?
Does any commissioners have questions?
Out of curiosity, what will you be warehousing here? Is this just like a generic
Equipment,
warehouse?
material, supplies,
Okay, just curious.
anything but auto body.
Okay.
Anybody else?
I may have some questions later, but not at this time.
Just for clarification, I saw this at SARC, so I know a little bit about it already, but so just clarification, these are gonna be there's gonna be 4 units, right? In the building.
That's what's proposed
They're-
right
they're
now.
s- They're separated into 4,
How they ultimately
four
get broken
distinct,
up is to be
off-
determined, but no more than 4 units.
no more than 4 units. So you would be leasing out maybe 4 units for various purposes of warehousing or
That's a
light
potential.
industrial,
That's a
right?
potential.
All right. Anybody else? Any questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Anybody else in the chamber who would like to speak on this? Anybody online? Did you want to come up and speak? Okay, we'll get to that one. On this particular topic. So we have no more speakers on this topic. I'll close that. And I guess we go to comments, right? How about we start on my right? Fields.
I think my main thought, I thought you asked a very sort of apropos question about what we would do for the residential standards, and it's a similar height. I feel for the neighbors. I understand that's a bummer to lose the property sight line, but understanding that we've put a lot of effort into sort of allowing for similar sized properties, and if this was housing, it'd be the same height and they're following all guidelines. I don't see anything in particular that would cause me to reject it. So that's where
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Fields. I think this is in line with what's allowed in that industrial area. The properties are oriented mostly like with the south is gonna be free of shadow. That's where the sun is coming from. That was like the main complaint that their trees will be shaded out and it will be for part of the day, but I don't think it's a valid reason to deny this request. So I'm in support.
Buckmeyer?
Okay, yeah, from what I can read this, it seems, I don't feel like they should be discretionary, like, we should have straightforward rules, and it sounds like we do, and we're just making it extra uncertain. Like, I don't really feel like there's a lot of discretion that I understand there are places we can exercise discretion, but it seems like the rules are pretty straightforward. And like, there are already trees casting shadows on those properties. And I do want to say, I understand that if your properties look the same for 50 years, your view has been the same for 50 years, it's going to feel odd and uncomfortable when that view changes. My condolences. I am sure that it will be okay. This is not a skyscraper. Those are my thoughts.
Mr. Craig?
I'm in the lead here with everybody else, but there's definitely an impact for those residents back there. I do feel for them. This is following the rules and it's been industrial and, this type of thing can happen. I think it's, when we have these conflicts like this, residential, commercial, residential, we have these all the time. And I guess one thing in my mind, it's kind of too bad that the parapet's not included as part of the building heights, because that's the impact for the neighbors. I mean, it's actually the height of any structure up there that's creating the the shadows per se. But we have it could be it could be 50 feet with the parapet right now, so it could be higher. There'll definitely be an impact on those neighbors, and those letters were very heartfelt, long time Campbell residents, and I am as well. So I know what they're saying, but seems like we're hitting all the requirements here, and it could be, quote unquote, a lot worse for the neighbors behind there. So, and I also, I guess the final question in my mind was, how much do you help them by making it a 12-foot setback instead of 10? 2 more feet, you still have pretty much the same issue, so to speak. And how much farther do you want to go in? And then you're getting into the discretion area that Commissioner Bookbinder mentioned. So yeah, we should be straightforward on these, and we should keep the same requirements for everybody as much as we can. So yeah, I would probably be in favor of this project.
Vice Chair?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel the same as my fellow commissioners. I think the applicant has complied with all the requirements and all the rules that we've set into place. And so I think it's a good project, and the reasons that were enumerated in the letters from the neighbors, I feel the impact is not going to be as much as they feel. It's the right of the property owner to develop his property versus the right of neighbor, and so I think that this is a good project, and I'll be in support of it. Thank you.
Yes, I really have anything more to add. I think all the commissioners have indicated pretty much my own feeling about it. You know, my only other take, and I don't mean to be harsh or thoughtless about this. I certainly appreciate the concerns of the residents, but you know, I kind of look at it. We've had other instances where people have lived in an area where they're adjacent to either a commercial or industrial area, and when they bought in, and you know, one never knows what's going to happen in an adjacent lot. We've even had ones where there's an adjacent lot and somebody's going to build a taller residential than theirs by a story, and that they're concerned about that. But you know, this is the nature of how things work in terms of zoning, and my take is that if you buy into a neighborhood that where your back fence abuts against a light industrial area, maybe you should be anticipating, you know, you're taking a risk associated with what could be going on in there in the future. So I am sympathetic. I understand. It looks to me like there's actually a lot of trees in people's backyards that give a buffer, which I think is a good thing. It's unfortunate that the applicant can't really do anything with the back fence. The back fence area in terms of putting in a bigger barrier, but then that would also probably, you know, as far as the shadows go, I think, you know, there's obviously going to be some part of the day where there's going to be shadowing, but this is what we are dealing with here as the city grows. You know, things that were good 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. It's not the nature of what we have in Campbell anymore, and things are going to change, and people need to be able to you know, go with that to a great extent. The applicant is within the constraints of what the city's requirements are. Limited to 2 stories. It wouldn't be a whole lot different if it was a residential development there. It's within a couple feet in terms of setback. It's within a foot of the same kind of minimum setback, and within a few feet of the height. So to me that seems relevant. That it doesn't. It's the fact that it happens to be a warehouse building is less of an issue. So I'm certainly, since it is in accordance with the requirements of the city, I certainly would support it.
Chair, I guess I will make a motion that the Planning Commission of Campbell approve a site and architectural review permit to allow construction of an approximately 10,250 square foot industrial warehouse building with an exception to the side setback requirement on property located at 940, 946 South McLincy Lane, PLN 2021-215.
Do we have a second?
Second.
I have a motion by Commissioner Gray and a second by Commissioner Fields. Can we have a voice vote?
Commissioner Fields?
Aye.
Commissioner Juski?
Aye.
Commissioner Buckbinder?
Aye.
Commissioner Gray?
Aye.
Vice Chair Kemper?
Aye.
Chair Cesar?
Aye. The motion is passed. Thank you. Thank you, planner, for your work. Appreciate it. Should we go back to item 2? Yes. Thank you. Item 2, PL-2023-174, 1402 Camden Avenue, public hearing to consider the request of Roddy Diaz on behalf of Latin Asian Fusion Kitchen to allow for beer and wine sales, liquor establishment in association with an existing restaurant with a 5 a.m. operational opening, late night activities, community cooking classes, private events on property located at 1402 Camden Avenue. The application and consideration is a conditional use permit file number PLN 2023-174. Staff is recommending the site be deemed categorically exempt under SEQA. Planning Commission action is final unless appealing in writing to city clerk within 10 calendar days. Project manager is our contract associate planner, Nishant Sioni.
That's correct.
Right?
Yeah. Okay, before I begin, can everyone see and hear me okay?
Yes, John, go, please proceed.
Okay, all right. Hi, everyone. My name is Nishant Sioni. I am the lead planner for this project. This project is located at 1402 Camden Avenue on the north side of Camden Avenue. The site is a 16,117 square foot parcel with both a land use and zoning designation of neighborhood commercial. There's an existing building that is occupied by the subject restaurant, a day spa, a donut shop, and a barber shop. And the site is surrounded by a variety of commercial uses and some residential uses. The applicant is requesting a use permit to allow the existing restaurant use to operate with hours beginning at 5 a.m. and ending at 11 p.m., as well as serve beer and wine. There's a slight modification to what was included in the report. Staff would arrive at the restaurant at 5 a.m. and breakfast service would begin at 7 a.m. and not 5 a.m. We can update the conditions to reflect that. In addition to beer and wine service and food service, there will be corporate and private events and community cooking classes on site, primarily on the weekends. There will be no physical alterations to the interior or exterior of the site or change in intensity or type of use, and the site has adequate existing parking. Beer and wine would only be served along with food service, and staff has determined that an overconcentration of liquor establishments in the area does not exist, consistent with the city methodology for determining overconcentration. If this project is approved, there will be a concentration of one establishment per 7.5 acres in this Camden Avenue commercial corridor. The nearest residence is 200 feet northwest of the restaurant, and it's separated from the restaurant by a road barrier and sound wall. Staff does not anticipate neighborhood compatibility issues, and the police department has also reviewed the project and determined the same. Additionally, we're recommending conditions of approval that limit operating hours, outdoor and noise generating activities, use of artificial light, as well as conditions that limit the serving of alcohol to be allowed only with food service, require training for staff on serving alcohol, and prevent the use of a bar area or rearrangement of furniture to allow congregation of people or live events. Staff has made all necessary use permit and liquor establishment findings and is recommending approval of the project.
Okay. Questions from the commission? Start on Commissioner Fields.
Question as it relates to the permit streamlining that we're doing. If my understanding is correct, since it's outside the downtown corridor, they would not need to do a conditional use permit for this, except maybe because of the late night operating hours thing.
Correct. If they applied in the future, they wouldn't need a use permit for the alcohol service. They would need it for the late night hours.
So even after the streamlining, if they wanted to do the same thing because of 5 a.m. instead of 6 a.m., they need to do this.
Right.
That's my question, and I'll comment on it later.
I do not have any questions.
Commissioner Buckman.
Commissioner Fields asked what was going to be my question.
Yeah, I have a couple quick questions here. And Nishant, I don't know if you would know this, but I noticed in your report that the city council denied an appeal of beer and wine license in 2016 because, and I guess I'm asking if, was that because of the karaoke issue?
I don't know the details of that project exactly. That was before my time. I believe it was because of overconcentration issues.
I actually worked on that. It had to do with the combination of the karaoke and the hours of operation and the beer and wine in combination with it being right next door to a house as well.
And it was the same business?
No.
Had to be a different
It was a different
business,
business.
2016, okay, that's what I was wondering, okay. And that was a real thorough report on the over concentration issue of liquor licenses. And I think we're fine here, but my question though, maybe for Daniel would be, we mentioned how Campbell doesn't codify the zoning to recognize the ABC undue concentration criteria, unlike other cities that have done that. Is that something that Campbell has ever thought necessary, or is it more trouble than it's worth, or it's just not that big an issue here?
It's a much broader policy discussion. There are arguments to whether or not ABC's requirements really are the best approach. That's well outside the scope of this.
All right, thank you.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
So there was some mention about business license expiration in September 2022. And I guess I don't understand. Are there any implications about it? Are they in the midst of have they gotten a new business license, or are they in the middle of getting a new business license? What's that about?
The applicant will be applying for a business license renewal as a condition of approval of this use permit. So for them to operate the way that they want to, they need to renew the business license.
Okay, so it'll be a condition of approval. Okay. With this early time of start operation, what's the delivery? Is there an issue with deliveries when deliveries come to this location? Because they're just, the back fence is a residential neighborhood, and there's a number of commercial businesses along that area of Camden. So has there been, or would there be some kind of restriction on deliveries too early in that area?
Let me just pull up our conditions. We addressed some of this. Just give me 1 second.
Well, also the time we have the numbers coming. Just for operation.
I guess I would ask if there is a way we make it a conditional thing for later deliveries.
Looks like Nishant, condition of approval number 3Q
Right.
B says deliveries restricted between the hours of 8 a.m. and 8 p.m.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm having some technical issues. But we do have that condition, and we can discuss that further.
Okay. I only have one other question. I don't know. Good questions. Do we have a restriction on when alcohol can be served? Say, like, I mean, here, if they open at 7 a.m. and give breakfast, somebody wants a beer with their breakfast. Are they allowed to do that?
We do allow alcohol service, but only in conjunction with the food service. So they couldn't serve it by itself without the kitchen being open and serving food.
Okay. All right.
And there's no alcohol that can be taken off site. It's only for consumption on site.
All right. Okay. Anybody have any other questions? Are we good? All right. I'll open it up. I'll open it up to public. I'll open it up to public comments, and if the applicant would like to come up and make, you've got 5 minutes if you want it. And if you state your name and your circumstances, the round on the side. There you go.
My name is Rudy Diaz. I'm with Animation Fusion. Very straightforward project, my operations. I want to thank you for your time reviewing the project. We took over this location. Used to be Dickey's Barbecue there before they went out of business. So our group and our family, we're all relocating to Campbell. So we karaoke and super late night activities. This is not our thing. Our main focus is to provide the community with cooking classes. And then we're heavily do a lot of takeout as well. We relocated from San Jose to Campbell. So most of our customers know us from takeout. They come in, grab a bite, hang out, and then they go. So thank you so much for reviewing this project. That's all.
Anybody have any questions?
So out of curiosity, if you had not had to do a discretionary hearing for the liquor license, would you still have gone to the trouble of doing this for the 5 a.m. opening hours?
Yes, because we need time to come and prepare. So that was one thing, and then the beer and license was the second thing for our cooking classes. So to offer wine when we teach these classes.
Thank you.
Anybody else? No? Just for my edification, so it sounds to me like you do a catering business, a truck business. You still do a truck business?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's been more of a kitchen, right? Is that what, am I correct in saying that you use that as a kitchen to prepare the food for the catering and the truck?
Takeout,
And
yes,
takeout,
catering,
okay.
and,
So the in-house service is a new thing. Where
Yes.
you're gonna turn it into a breakfast, lunch.
correct. Yeah, it
Restaurant.
was requested by the community around. So
My only other
we all want
question
to come.
my only other question is it really good food?
Yeah, it is. Come on. It's
Okay.
a nice infused. But yeah, it was. That's the plan. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, I'll close. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
I'll close that and then we start with comments. Commissioner Buckman,
Anybody else want to talk?
comments.
Was there any?
Oh, yeah, okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anybody else from the public? No? Okay, I'll close the public hearing then. Commissioner Buckman?
Yeah, I don't see any, this, like, it's not a huge amount of traffic in a residential neighborhood that's gonna start operating at 5 in the morning. It just seems reasonable for what they're asking. I don't see any problems with this.
That seems fine to me. Thanks.
Same here. I'm glad we're streamlining the food and liquor. This reminds me of the fitness studio though, that wanted to open at 5 and do setup, and they had to come in and do the whole rigmarole. So a future streamlining I would love us to do is maybe carve out a 5 a.m. open with light and noise restrictions that would let businesses that follow that come and set up at 5 a.m. Because I love streamlining. So that's my unrelated comment, but I'm very happy for you and your business. Thank you for coming here. Very supportive.
Yeah, no, nothing additional, but it sounds delicious and I'm excited.
Yeah, I agree. I think, that area, it's established and there's a number of food places along those couple blocks there. And this has been there for a while and it's minimal change. And so it sounds good to me that we're able to go ahead and maybe in the future it could be a ministerial, I don't know. But meanwhile, I certainly am in favor of it. Do I have a motion? Somebody? If you can look it up.
So I guess the motion is for planning commission to accept the determination of this project. And actually I should be reading, adopt a resolution approving conditional use permit to allow for beer and wine sales and liquor establishment in association with an existing restaurant with a 5 a.m. operational opening late night activity.
And may I suggest an amendment to that, to 7 a.m. service start? Since that wasn't in the original,
Yeah, we'll modify that.
can we agree, just all agree to that? Since it wasn't in your motion.
Yes.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Bookbinder. Can we have a vote?
Commissioner Fields,
Aye.
Commissioner Krajewski,
Aye.
Commissioner Bookbinder.
Aye.
Commissioner Craven.
Aye.
Vice Chair Kemper.
Aye.
Chair Scissor.
Aye. Motion pass.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time.
Sean, have a good night.
You too.
Anybody need a break? Okay, we'll move on. Okay, actually, item four, permissibility of land use and regulation of business, PLN 2023-175. This item is recommended action to continue its consideration for the next meeting of February 13th, 2024.
I'll move that we continue item number 4 to the planning commission meeting of February 13th, 2024.
Second. Okay. Vote.
Commissioner Fields,
Aye.
Commissioner Krajewski,
Aye.
Commissioner Bookbinder.
Aye.
Commissioner Craven.
Aye.
Vice Chair Kemper.
Aye.
Chair Scissor.
Aye. So that's been pushed next meeting. Item
Can
5.
I ask staff just briefly what the holdup was?
Yeah, so
Thank you. Yeah, so just in brief, in addition to the changes to permissibility of land uses that were being considered for the commercial and industrial zoning districts that we last discussed, at the council meeting, the police department had also expressed interest in streamlining a number of the permits which currently require council review and authorization to permit. And right now, we're just working on going through those updates of Title V and Title 10 to address their feedback, and it just requires a little bit more time to implement.
Thank you.
Okay, item 5, PLN 2023-155, zoning map housing overlay districts and related zoning code text amendments. Continue public hearing to consider the establishment of new zoning map incorporating 3 new housing overlay zoning districts and adoption of related zoning code text amendments. PLN 2023-155. Staff is recommending that this project be found consistent with the final environmental impact report. I'm not going to read that. Prepared for 2040 general plan and 2023-2031 housing element. Tentative city council date is February 6th. Project planner is Stephen Rhodes.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Zisser, members of the Planning Commission. So just as a brief overview of tonight's meeting structure before getting into it. So after a brief overview of key events leading up to tonight, the bulk of the presentation will focus on recent amendments to the Affordable Housing Overlay Zone in response to council direction and developer feedback. So as many of you will recall, last year the city adopted a new general plan and housing elements, which included the 3 programs shown here on the screen, which broadly call for the creation of new housing overlay districts to support the development of affordable housing and to comply with state law. Given the program similarities, implementation efforts have been combined. Our last touch point had been in October of last year, where we held study sessions with both the Planning Commission and the City Council to receive their feedback on the development of the overlay districts. So in development of the three overlay districts, the city council most recently directed staff to design the affordable housing overlay zone to complement the state density bonus law as opposed to competing with it. It also, the council also directed staff to exclude low density residential zones, focus incentives on the production of affordable housing, while also avoiding incentives that reduce fees or waive or otherwise reduce utility undergrounding requirements. And council also they emphasized, in particular, they really wanted to hear from developers and affordable housing developers on incentives that work, that can actually meaningfully contribute to the production of additional affordable housing units. We've done that, which I'll cover in a minute. Separately, on the buy right and the reuse sites overlay, largely the council just recognized that these are both overlays which are required by law. There's limited discretion in their implementation, and directed staff to proceed with them as they had been presented in the study sessions. And specific to the buy right housing overlay, the option which they had sought to pursue was option 3, which is really preserving and protecting the mixed use zones where possible. So again, to support the development and the identification of incentives to be included in the affordable housing overlay, staff held meetings with developers and also circulated a simple 3-question survey. Feedback from developers included the 8 incentives shown here on screen. I'll cover these in depth on the following slides, so I won't repeat myself here. So the first of which is a request to increase the allowable density of new housing development projects. This is already something that's in state law, but could be certainly expanded upon through a local affordable housing overlay zone. So in this particular case, the affordable housing overlay will provide a density bonus which go above and beyond the minimum requirements of state law, but by providing a greater percentage of very low, or moderate income housing units by category than otherwise required. What we've done specifically is design the program to fill a gap in existing state law, specifically AB 2345, AB 1287. Which, so we're largely bookended on 2 ends of this, but it could allow for new development within the affordable housing overlay that say provided a 19% very low income percentage in their project, a density bonus of up to 65% as an example. And this is just, I'll just mention, it's an example of how state law is already exceedingly generous. It's difficult for the city to compete. I think we found a good way to do so as part of this program. The second comment which we had heard was a desire to expedite permit processing. So through the affordable housing overlay zone, the city will allow for expedited permit processing, which will be largely dependent on the level of affordability of the project, as well as whether or not the project could otherwise, depending on its eligibility for a CEQA exemption. As a result, the table shown here on screen, which is a little bit too small to read, pretty much mirrors the city's existing process against that under the affordable housing overlay zone and that under state law. The same table is provided in the staff report. But broadly right now, you have kind of a three-tier process, everything from a director level decision all the way between like when you have less than 5 units, planning commission can decide on all housing development projects over 5, and council really picks up those projects which are on large sites or otherwise subject to an overlay. Whereas this will provide for again, an administrative decision for those items which would otherwise be going to planning commission or potentially council, provided that you are providing these affordable housing obligations, you're satisfying them, and you are ineligible for a CEQA exemption. When you are eligible, we could process this even more streamlined through ministerial or a building permit, effectively a zoning clearance process. And that would be for those projects which meet all of those requirements. So next up was a request to reduce development impact fees. This is not unexpected, but also providing for funding of projects or potentially loans. So in response, the affordable housing overlay zone, so the council provided us pretty clear direction. They didn't want us to directly target reductions in fees, which could have a significant fiscal impact to the city. So instead, we have developed two programs, which two alternative financial incentives. The first of which could be used to support exceptionally affordable housing projects. The first of which is the city is looking at exploring a new affordable housing fee, which could be collected as part of a Nexus study. It's up and coming. If and when those funds are established to support new housing development projects, the idea is that we would allocate priority funding to projects within the affordable housing overlay zone when you are meeting certain affordability requirements. That said, understanding it may be years before that funding is available. City is separately considering allowing for a reduction in park and lieu fees. This is essentially the city's only development impact fee, which we collect today, which could allow for a reduction of up to 50% of the current fees which are charged. The example again is shown on the screen and in the report, showing that a theoretical 100-unit project could receive up to a $1.5 million reduction in their fees if for a 100% affordable housing project. Now, understanding it's not the city's incentive idea to provide both of these incentives long term, just it's kind of to fill in a gap in timing until such time local supportive housing funds can become available. The two programs would not be able to be combined in the new affordable housing overlay zone. So the next incentive was a request to reduce development requirements. So in the report, all that we indicated as staff is that state law, this is again another area where state law is already exceedingly generous. It's difficult for the city to locally compete because of the use of concessions, and an unlimited number of waivers can allow developers to get around local development requirements. That said, as a new incentive for your consideration tonight, on screen is an added incentive which we may choose to offer 100% affordable housing projects, which would essentially waive all design requirements, excepting adjacency standards. The intent behind this is to kind of make it clearer that affordable housing developers will likely encounter limitations trying to comply with our recently adopted multifamily development design standards as they pursue more cost-effective or maybe even modular housing construction projects. So it makes it really clear that the city's intent is to waive those standards when those projects do advance. It will make it more streamlined when we do review those projects for compliance. You don't need to go to the same extent to documenting in what ways they don't necessarily meet the standard as we would be summarily effectively waiving them. Now, the one standard which we seek to retain are adjacency standards. These are those which really apply like a setback requirement abutting, let's say, lower density or lower intensity residential zoning districts, kind of like what you're seeing here on screen. So the idea is that instead of having that big, tall, looming building right up against that single family home, they would still need to have some degree of separation or break in their building to provide for relief in those kind of situations. That's be the one element which we'd want to retain. Just on three other topics which are raised, that being extending permitting process, extending the permit approval period, use of city property, and considering expanding the city's housing in lieu fee. The first of which we did acknowledge and include as part of the affordable housing overlay zone an extension of the city's standard approval period to now be 3 years. This would apply to only the first approval of new housing development projects. It would not be extended to subsequent approvals. If we came back to modify the permit or apply for, say, another extension of approval. It also would not apply to the building permits or other ministerial actions of the city. It varies, but yes, for subdivision projects, it would be 2 to 3 as an example. Separately, the developers suggested the city to consider utilizing city property. It's a great opportunity for the city to say, if we have available property to reuse or redevelop, offer it up to affordable housing developers instead of money if the city doesn't have funds available. I will just reiterate or remind the commission that the City Corporation Garden was included as a housing opportunity site as part of the housing element. It remains under review, and it's staff's intention to return back to the City Council later this year with a report outlining the feasibility of the project as it still remains in progress. We don't really have an additional update this time. There weren't any other sites identified to date for that consideration.
And I think the last incentive that which had been requested by developers had been really expanding the city's housing and lieu fee program. As again previously mentioned, the city has a lot of things going on right now. Another thing which we're working on is a nexus study, which is exploring expanding the city's in collection of lieu fees, or it could be both. It's for both commercial and industrial development. So when a new project gets built, we might take a small percentage of the, like add a minor fee, which could be used or programmed to support the development of affordable housing. But then separately, the housing and lieu fee program, this is where the developer doesn't want to build a housing unit. They might want to fee out the unit instead. So we're also looking at collecting minor differences and how rounding works, and maybe expanding the program to include more housing development projects than we currently do. So again, because those updates are going to be considered as part of a separate item, staff is recommending postponing any action at this time, as those changes would broadly be premature without the nexus study having been completed. Okay, so in addition to the feedback which we had heard from developers, staff has proposed 2 additional changes of our own. So again, what we'd heard from the council was a desire to not extend the affordable housing overlay zone within the low density residential land use designation city. Staff is also recommending excluding industrial and historic properties. So if you wanted to qualify for the program, you would not be eligible in those areas. And then secondly, as an additional eligibility threshold, we also require right now, even in the previous presentation of the item, that you may not use state concessions or waivers to alleviate program requirements. Staff is also adding an additional recommendation that we require adherence to the Tier 1 mixed use requirement wherever indicated in the city's adopted form-based zone map. So what you're seeing here on the screen is just a snippet of the city's form-based zone map. The Tier 1 requirements were those which were like where we're holding the highest bar. That's really just the downtown, like key commercial corridors and intersections. Other areas like kind of runs of properties between those key intersections were assigned a secondary tier, Tier 2. In those areas, developers would not need to adhere with that requirement in order to qualify for the affordable housing overlay. So this largely allows the city to kind of achieve its kind of development expectations in key areas like the downtown. So if there's a ground floor commercial expectation of the area, you could probably still alleviate yourself of the requirement through state density bonus law, but you wouldn't be able to avail yourself of the other incentives being offered by the program if you choose to follow it.
Tier 1, Tier 2. How does Tier 1 and Tier 2 enjoy with the T3 and T4 designations on the form-based map?
So the T3 and T4, those apply the form-based zone. So that's the parcels themselves. That applies like the development intensity, the capacity, the height, and development standards. The Tier 1 and Tier 2 standards, they apply just specifically a ground floor non-residential requirement. And they vary based on exactly the tier. So you have to provide more meaningful commercial space in Tier 1 than in the Tier 2 setting. So it's just applied just literally as a line on the map as opposed to as part of the form-based zone. Okay, and with that, and to just really sum, I know that's a lot to digest, and to kind of sum it all up, we were trying to provide a single, simple case study of a 50-unit mixed-use housing development project is showing how it kind of goes through a check of eligibility. Will this project qualify or not for certain incentives under the affordable housing overlay zone? So this sample project, which we're providing, this project would be, say, as a case study, proposing in a transit-oriented mixed-use zoning district of the city. Because it's located outside of a single-family industrial historic area, it could qualify. So yes, it meets the very first kind of threshold. The second is that if there is a Tier 1 ground floor requirement indicated in the form-based map, that the project will make sure to abide by it by providing for a mixed-use ground level. In this particular case, the project would comply with that. So that really gets you in the door. So if you make it past those first 2 eligibility checks, now we're talking about, okay, now which incentives is this project going to get? So as this particular developer in this case study would be providing a 19% of their units affordable to very low income households. In exchange, as part of the affordable housing overlay zone, they get a 65% density bonus. This is more than what you would otherwise get under state law, but less than what the double state density bonus could get you. They could also qualify for expedited permit processing because their project both not only meets the affordability requirement, but also qualifies for a CEQA exemption. They would seek to, in this case study, waive the design requirements of the project, except of course the adjacency standards. However, they would not qualify. Because again, what we're proposing under that particular provision is that the project would have to be at least 100% affordable to summarily waive the development standards, accepting the adjacency standards. As an example of how this project would not comply. Also, under seeking either reduced or deferral of development impact fees, although the project once again is 19% affordable, it would be ineligible. It would be only eligible for priority funding once available, but it would be ineligible for reduction in parking and lieu fees, because the minimum thresholds for that program have to be at least 50% affordable, and then scaling up to 50, then 75, and 100. And again, across the board, pretty much any project within the affordable housing overlay zone would get that 3-year permit approval, irrespective of the level of affordability that they hit, so long as it meets the minimum requirements of the overlay. Okay, so with that, just to reiterate, I know it was mentioned, I think the very first thing in tonight's agenda, we did receive 2 letters as desk items tonight. They were from developers who are working the Winchester VTA station project, that being related in path. Generally speaking, the letters just express support of the proposed housing overlay district without a lot of specifics. In terms of next steps, although it's indicated that we had a tentative city council meeting date of February 6th, we're now targeting the meeting date of February 20th, so I just want to make that clear to the public. And then once we do make this item, once we do bring this item to the city council, and on second reading, the ordinance would only be effective 30 days following its passage and adoption. So with that, that concludes staff's presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Sign this thing.
Thank you for the thorough report. That's very helpful. On priority funding, there's sort of a mention that like the city has no current funds available. I'm not familiar with how Campbell's budget has been going back decades, but have we run surpluses historically? Like, or like, the motivation of my question is how realistic is it this would ever?
So broadly speaking, Campbell's housing program has lived off of old redevelopment levies 10 years ago. When the city had redevelopment, it generated a lot of funds, and a portion of that had to go to housing. My understanding, the city has not really collected any real new revenues into its affordable housing fund. So it's been living off of those redevelopment funds, and that's been declining over the last 10 years. We're at the point now where there's really no funding to support the program. So we can, normally a robust housing program would have monies where you would subsidize affordable housing to make it pencil. We are looking at new revenue sources. Again, Stephen mentioned the Nexus fees, and that has options of us requiring commercial linkage fees. And if you're in the inclusionary housing ordinance, you could pay some lieu fees. So that's a revenue source. We do have a new housing manager that's looking at potential other grant funds or at matching sources. So over the next few years, we're looking at capacity building to try and bring new revenues into the city. At some point, we hope stand before you at one point over the next 8 years and say, hey, we have money in the bank that we could actually support an affordable housing project. But till then, knowing we don't, to Stephen's point, a lot of affordable housing developers can't get matching funding from tax credits or federal funds unless they show that Campbell has supported them. So one of the proposals is that we would, instead of providing funding we don't have, reduce our park impact fees. Actually help them get match funding and help the pencil.
Got it. Super helpful. I forget which number it is, but where the state's law is about 50% for moderate income, and then we're doing like 47, 18, 32, or some derivatives. Let's say all the developers picked 18%, like the very low income. I'm just curious, like, why are we offering the 3 levels? Like, are we incentivized to provide all of those, or are our goals sort of the three levels agnostic. I was just curious why we offered a selection versus just the one.
So if I'm clear, I first just established, speaking to, we had one program under the expediting permit processing. Is that it's item, it was the second incentive. Where we do have.
About the first incentive, which is VLI.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't have.
It occurs in two locations. One is under increasing allowable density, where we kind of filled a gap in state density bonus law.
Yep.
Between, and there's an example of like the 16 to 19% VLI.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
so,
I'm talking about number two, where the, yeah.
Okay, two. Yeah, so I mean, broadly, this is just getting at the different types of affordable housing the project may provide. So very low, low, and moderate. So that's why we have the three tiers, as opposed to just saying only can provide a singular product type as affordable project. I'm not sure if there's an expansion of your question, but
well, just like so the state wants you to do 50% moderate, and we're offering like the 30% low income or 18%. If all of the developers picked 18%, which the net result is 80% of the housing was not low income, or like why are we doing that? I think the question is trying to understand, like, is our eventual goal just raw number of low income housing, or is there like a sub goal where we're trying to get very low income, which is why we're offering that?
I would say there's a definitive equivalency between a project which is providing a 47% moderate or 50% moderate level of income in the project and an 18% very low. The impact developer who's providing that percentage of very low income households is effectively having the same amount of cost lost in their overall forma as a 18% very low housing project. So it's kind of like an equity answer, I guess, is one perspective on it. Because the two values are generally equitable, but I mean that's absolutely something that we could discuss more. That if he feels if a larger percentage. Now that said, the city's regional housing needs allocation does touch on each of these income categories. So the city needs more of all three. And we have not had a great track record of hitting any of the three and at 100%. So we could certainly even recalibrate the program over time in the event that we're overperforming, which would be great news. If we're starting to do way too well, then we could recalibrate the program to incentivize the categories which are not doing.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for understanding my convoluted question. My last one, I recall when we discussed this last time, we talked a little bit about like where the low income housing was placed or the types of low income housing within the development. And I don't see any mention of that anymore. Is that just?
Yeah, it's a good observation. So that was another item the city council directed us to remove from consideration. So they didn't want us to explore it. I think it even been recommended for removal between planning commission and council based on the council, based on the planning commission's feedback.
So is that why on the map, even though there's supposedly a box for affordable housing, there is no AH designation on the map?
That's a separate matter. So to address them in turn. So the first is on going forward between the planning commission study session, and Commissioner Fields' comment, the allocation of individual affordable housing units is as potential incentive was allowing developers, let's say you're doing a mixed product type, you're doing an apartment building on one side, townhomes, allowing that developer to concentrate all of their affordable units only in, say, the apartment building, so they could make more money selling the townhome units. Planning commission was not really supportive of that approach. When we forwarded the item to the council, they agreed, and effectively staff had already changed our position on it as well. That item had already fallen out at that point, so it didn't get carried forward. So that's why it's not in the affordable housing overlay district as an incentive as currently presented. Now, a separate matter in terms of the overall city zoning map that I can just pull it up here on screen. The affordable housing overlay zone is not graphically depicted.
It's looking really hard for it.
Yeah, it's not graphically depicted because it applies so broadly. Again, the overarching direction, this might be too hard to see. the overarching direction from the council, we want to apply it effectively everywhere that state density bonus law applies. But to apply a crosshatch or some type of symbology on every single eligible parcel in the city would have been very cluttered looking. So it's just the way that we're graphically depicting it versus speaking to its eligibility and its applicability in the ordinance itself. So there is a reference to it at the bottom of the map itself. It says Affordable Housing Overlays District. And there's a footnote just saying, see the section of our municipal code for its effective, where it applies. It pretty much says everywhere but single family, industrial, and historic.
Those are all my questions, so thank you.
So I just want to say, I really appreciate that we're using by right approval where possible and being very clear about which standards we actually want to keep in exchange for those by right approvals. And I appreciate the provision of higher potential densities. So first question, what proportion of our residential land is low density residential? Like what portion is excluded from this?
I couldn't tell you that figure offhand. That's a low density residential is effectively single. So if you're looking at the map,
so all the yellow parts?
Yeah, really materially the yellow parts you're seeing on the screen. So maybe 6 of the city would easily fall within that percentage, maybe more. It also would include some of the PD zone, the blue, which happens to have a low density residential general plan land use designation.
Okay, so this is by general plan designation, not zoning designation.
Correct.
Do we have the ability to exempt BMR projects from CEQA? I'm guessing we don't as a city.
No.
Okay, so that's like by state law, it's either administrative or ministerial based on CEQA, which we don't control.
No, that particular provision is distinct. That's a incentive we're offering as for expedited permit processing specific to the affordable housing overlay zone.
Right.
So the by right housing overlay, that was something that had been separately considered as part of the general plan update. That's why our overarching.
Pardon me, I'm saying by right just to denote like not discretionary, not specifically the by right housing overlay. So for the affordable housing overlay, that it either requires administrative or ministerial permit depending on CEQA. That is because we don't have control over whether or not something is exempt from CEQA.
Correct. That was a way that we had structured that.
Okay, that makes sense. So the broader question I have is, why are we not so looking at the example increase allowable density, how the programs each for VLI band, the state density bonus law is 5 to 15%, proposing to cover 16 to 90%, and double density bonus law is 20 to 30%. Since we're offering incentives not present in state density bonus law, why do we not extend our overlay zone to cover the entire 5 to 19% range?
Well, I mean, effectively, this is an incentive specifically targeting the allowable density of a project. So they would already qualify under state density bonus law without that particular incentive being offered for 5 to 15%.
Right. We would also provide them with ministerial or administrative approval, which I don't think state density bonus law gives you. Like, there's still an incentive there, right?
Correct. So they'd have to at least hit the city's percentages in order to qualify for those additional incentives.
Right. I guess I'm asking, like the additional incentive is you get more density. I guess I'm wondering why we don't take our overlay zone and have it cover the entire range of 5 to 19%. Still be providing benefits.
So I'll answer a little bit if I understand. I think the point of if the commission remembers, our program is not, we're intended to compete with state density bonus law to go above and beyond. And the intent was to get more affordable units. So I think if you want these extra sweeteners, such as ministerial processing, reduction in fees, you have to provide more affordable units.
I guess so. I understand the perspective. I'll bring this back around in discussion. Those are the questions I had.
Yeah, thanks for this report, Stephen. I think Campbell will hopefully get some more affordable housing with this. I think this is really a plus. But So I know you talked to developers and I think that's great feedback and there's a lot of numbers we just went through. And I know we got these letters from the two developers on the one specific project, but did you get a sense from the developers of whether all these incentives we're offering might actually result in more affordable housing units? Did we give them that kind of specifics or was it more general kind of a thing?
I would generally characterize the feedback we received as very general. That said, the particular one that affordable housing developers indicated was absolutely paramount importance was that some type of financial incentive, like the reduction in park and lieu fees, because they use it so separate from the city's own contribution. That type of allocation helps them score higher when they're applying for other outside agency funding. So they're indicating really without some type of local funding of some kind, it's very difficult for them to secure additional funding sources. And so they really, it's right, without some type of match, it could be more unlikely for the city to see those types of deeply or extremely affordable housing projects keep occurring. So if you think about a difference in the number of units between 0 and actually the number of project units you're seeing in this project.
You know, it looked to me, so I know the biggest need, I mean, we need affordable housing, we need housing, we need affordable housing. The biggest need out of all of that would be the very low income housing. And it seems to me that we are trying to do that with some of our items here. Is that fair to say or no?
Well, I'd say across the board, we did extend the programs to include the very low income. So and then in order to qualify for the next tier up, let's say low income or moderate, you're again still needing to provide a greater allocation of your project.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I guess what I'm trying to ask is, have we, you know, there's a lot to digest, but have we made special efforts for very low income housing as opposed to low income or moderate income housing?
I would say that the general approach was just extending state density bonus law across the board, across all three income categories. Yeah, we absolutely do help address low income and very low income in particular. And usually developers prefer providing a lower percentage of very low income units than moderate or low income units. So arguably the program is probably geared more towards supporting very low income units than the other two housing income categories.
Yeah, no, that's kind of the sense I got, and I think that's good. And my one final question is a real stupid one, but what's the difference between administrative and ministerial permits?
Yeah, so the administrative decision process would be something it's decided upon by the community development director, and it would be we still do a public notice, 300-foot notice. There could be, and we write a report, write a decision on it. It's appealable. In this particular case, is an amendment to the affordable housing overlay zone. In order to make sure you don't have 3 hearings on an item you would otherwise qualify for 2, you'd go straight on appeal to the city council, unique to this program. The ministerial process is similar to a SB 9 application or other applications the city is currently processing. If you meet all the objective requirements, the project is effectively approved. There's no public notice. And it just would then, after the zoning clearance, advance straight to a building permits.
Just generally speaking, is that a big financial plus for a developer to be able to do a ministerial versus administrative? It's significant. It is. Okay.
Time and cost savings.
All right.
Permit.
Interesting.
Fee and everything across the board.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So for the benefit of newer commissioners, myself, Commissioner Majewski, and maybe Commissioner Fields, these categories of affordable housing, it would be nice if we had a single sheet that described, if I'm not mistaken, we have just market rate, we have moderate, we have low, and then we have very low. So there's a total of 4 categories, right?
Cities, municipal code also recognizes acutely low and a few other categories.
Okay. So
Extremely low.
Extremely low and acutely low.
Okay. So for Campbell, whatever categories there are, the 4 I mentioned plus the other ones, it would be nice if we could have a single page that can be included with whatever packet talks about affordable. So just as a reminder for the commissioners or for whoever is reviewing the package, what do these mean? And by that, like one of the I guess, one of the observations is what's affordable in Campbell, even though it's in Santa Clara County, is not the same as what's affordable in Los Altos Hills, even though it is in Santa Clara County. So depending on the areas, the level of affordability changes. So if we could have a,
It's kind of
yeah, my understanding is depending on what city you are, the affordability change. So if we can have a sheet where we have the categories in one column, what income relates to each one in another column, then on the next column, what sales price for the home approximately would be equivalent. So this way, people who are not planners or who are not in the industry can relate to what is affordable in Campbell, what is very low income in Campbell, and maybe even a square footage of the units that we're talking about, you know. So this way there would be a little bit more of a, I think, understanding as to the things that you're recommending. Now, my take from when I was reading the material was you were basically, these basically would relate to the VLI, the very low income category. You know, am I mistaken? This applies to all levels of affordability or just the VLI?
it applies to the very low income and above.
The
Up
VLI.
until moderate. So very low income, and moderate income is what we've targeted the affordable housing overlay zone to target. But I understand what you're describing in terms of a table. I mean, the city does have, I'll just share briefly.
There's some stuff in the housing.
Perfect. You know, if we could,
It doesn't have all of what he's asking for, but there's certain pieces in the housing.
Right, so on screen as an example, this would be, say, the unit sale prices. They do vary every single year, so keeping up with the current pricing has always been a challenge. And it varies by rental versus ownership and by income limit. The income limits luckily don't change. It's a percentage of the average median income of households in the county. So any property in Santa Clara County, so it doesn't matter if you're buying a home, say Cupertino or Campbell, these are the maximum income limits. Now, individual cities have different methodologies of calculating how you account for utilities and other kind of little minor fees, but generally speaking, this is what you're seeing.
You have to do one for rental too.
Right, we do have a rental one, which is separate. Right. And we do publish this online, so it's on the city's housing pages.
but I mean, to get to this, it needs some knowledge of the Campbell's website, knowledge of the housing element. But if we could maybe,
We'd be happy to.
if we could just include it, I think it really helps, you know, and maybe even, you know, include some idea as to what does this translate into as far as cost or square footage, you know, just, you know,
Educational.
educational, you know, I mean, it would have more informed discussion, deliberation here, you know,
Well, this was presented under the housing, but we're happy to cycle it in.
just a suggestion. Thank you. That was basically my comment.
Just to follow on to Commissioner Camcrest, I did go into, when I was reading this, which is very complicated, and thank you for doing all this, but it's like a lot. I'm not sure I understand all of it, but and I know that we went over this in the studies. We went over this in study sessions, but it's like it was a lot of stuff. I actually went into the housing element to look at the RENA again to see the actual, what I was looking for is the breakdown of very low, moderate, and above moderate in terms of the different requirements that we have on the RENA numbers. So we have 25% of our RENA numbers are supposed to be VLI, for example. So, and just around half are supposed to be affordable in general. So, but it's always good to kind of have that in front of you for some of the stuff that we go over. I don't know about getting down to the square footage stuff with myself, but you're the developer guy. My question was related a little bit to what some others said, is like you're filling this gap on the VLI as the 16 to 19%. And I guess my question kind of is similar to somebody else's question. Is like, are there other gaps for the other areas that we could be filling in too, or is it just the VLI's one that we could find?
Yeah, and if I can clarify possibly a prior comment that I'd made, I misunderstood the question. The city's affordable housing overlay, the ordinance itself does cover all three categories of affordability. But the example you saw on screen of just the very low income level was just for example purposes.
Okay.
For easy comparison against state density bonus law and state double density bonus law. But if you I could pull it up here on screen pretty quickly. The actual table from the ordinance is far more encompassing.
Okay, so in your increased allowable density, you actually are covering more than that one example.
So is it fair to say that you could provide units in, so there's three categories of below market: moderate, low, very low. You could provide a different proportion of units in different categories. The lower you go, usually the higher density you get. And this program isn't deviating from state density bonus law. It's matching that you can provide units in any one of those categories.
All right, I did look at all that red stuff, and I guess it's in that red stuff.
And that's what it's capturing here. So just on screen, so this is your percentage of very low. So this is the example we're providing that 16 to 19 range that you see on that prior slide. But of course, if you were to do a very low income project, you'd range from 25 to 34, or I'm sorry, low. And if you did moderate, there's a different banding that's available.
Okay.
So the tables expand across all three categories.
All right, good. That's good. I did go through that. I didn't put the two together, I guess. Okay, so I had a question about the going to 3 years versus 2 years. I don't really understand what you get from the 3 year, or what the developer gets from the 3 year. Is this a longer period of time for them to go through the whole process from start to finish? Is that what we're offering them?
It is. It's greater assurance to the developer that their project, all the time and energy that their team spent entitling the project, won't be subject to new state laws or other local changes that could affect their project. So it's extending their entitlement period from 2 years to a 3 year kind of like guarantee before the project expires. So they bet that they have difficulty securing financing. Let's say there's an economic downturn, the next COVID hits,
So
they can't pull their permits.
So the end of that period is the period when they break ground? What is that?
So they'd have 3 years to effectuate their land use entitlement. The way that that's done is through a building permit application. So they need to, at minimally within 3 years, submit their building permit to the city, and then they would need to keep their building permit active thereafter. Obtain a building permit.
You have to start over again. Okay, so my other, thank you for the clarification. The other thing is city-owned properties, okay? We had 2 city-owned properties that were on the list at one time, and I don't know if all the city council rejected the First Street garage. I guess that went off the table.
Yes, that's correct.
Right. Okay. I didn't like the fact that it went off the table. I know that we never really got a whole detailed understanding, other than it's complicated and difficult because of it's not one owner or one leaser, or we own the land for the First Street garage, I assume, because it's public land. But the garage itself has some complications in terms of legal implications on who has rights to what, is my understanding. And that's supposedly very difficult. Okay. Now, I personally think, since we don't have anything else other than the corporate yard, which as yet we haven't figured out how to find another corporation yard, that the First Street, I personally think the First Street garage should still be considered. I don't understand the legal difficulties, but if they're just legal difficulties, no offense, but if they're just legal difficulties, it would seem to me that we should work, what's what they say, the impossible, we just have to work harder at it. At least Steve Jobs said that. But it seems to me, I don't know how hard you've worked on it, okay? But I guess my question is, you know, shouldn't we be working, because affordable housing is such an important issue here, and we have, and that publicly owned land is one of the essential pieces of making it go ahead. Okay, is that the affordable housing developers are usually nonprofits, and they need help. And one of the key elements of the help that they need is public land given to them, or at a premium price. I don't know how it works, whether they give it to them for $1 or whatever. But that's such an important part of getting, say, 100% affordable project built, that if this is the only other public land piece we have, it seems to me we should be working hard to figure out how to overcome. Now, if there's other reasons, if there are political reasons, I don't want to hear about the political reasons, but if it's just figuring out new leasing arrangements or figuring out new covenants or whatever it is that they are that need to be changed, it would seem to me that the city should be working hard on that. Now, maybe they already have. And so I'm just putting it out there. I don't know if any of the other commissioners feel similarly to me on that, but it's in many ways, I mean, it's a 2-level garage, which the top level of the garage is never used. You know, it's usually empty 90% of the time. Okay, I've been by that garage many times because I once heard a council member say, well, you know, we don't have very much parking in downtown. And then I went over the First Street. I mean, I live near the Second Street garage, which is used up a lot. The First Street garage, if you go over there, they're all parked at the bottom and the top is almost always empty. Now, maybe at 11 o'clock at night on a Saturday, it fills up. Some people can go to Cartoon, but otherwise, you've got this really big space of air, okay, in the city that could be filled with a few levels of residential. And I just have a problem with that. And I bring it up only because, you know, if I got enough agreement that we could put into our resolution that we would recommend looking further on the First Street garage property to be considered under the city-owned property part of the affordable housing. But that's just my take on it. I don't know if the staff wants to comment.
The questions and answers. I was waiting for the question at the end of that.
So my question is this totally, if it's off the table, can it be put back on the table, or at least the commission can make a recommendation to reconsider? How's that for a question?
Generally, Commissioner Sullivan has rights to forward on any recommendation to the council. And my impression after living through the entire general plan housing element hearings is they deliberated all the sites and resoundingly gave direction to focus only on the corporation. It's not a dispute over that direction.
Right. And I guess my question on that is, what was the rationale?
Yeah, at this point, I mean, we'd be relitigating a decision that was made almost a year ago. So,
you know, sometimes you can relitigate.
Can I suggest that we're pretty far afield from the
Well, not if we're going to vote on we're going to vote on giving our recommendation and of this piece, and this piece includes city-owned property. Okay.
the affordable housing overlay zone applies to all that land regardless of whether the city has decided to allocate it at this point.
But they don't have it in the list. They don't have it. So
I guess what I'd
if it's
suggest,
off the table,
I'd suggest to I mean, the general focus of this program is not on property owned sites. I think that was just, that's a different tool. There are buckets of tools. Some of them are commercial linkage fees, inclusionary housing ordinance. This tool that focuses on an enhanced state density bonus law. A separate tool is city owned sites. I just advise the commission to focus on that broadly as a tool. If the will of the commission is to want to pass on to the council a suggestion to reconsider city-owned sites, you're more within your rights to do so. I just would, they're just two different tools, I think, as we.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may, thank you. As a civil engineer, in order to reuse a structure like that for additional housing, you have to rebuild it because the foundation was not designed for additional weight of the housing, the walls that carry the additional weight of, stories above that. So it's not going to be, we have an open space that just, take it up. It has to be much more has to be done to it. And I was under the impression that there is an agreement to use part of that garage for the development next door's parking. And so going back and trying to get them to agree to park elsewhere until this thing is built or something, those are the reasons that the city council had said, let's take it off the list. Having said that, if it's willing, if it's the will of the commission to just put the proposal out there, I understand and I will support it. I just feel that it's going to be more to it than just adding on to the 2 stories that's there. You have to go back to beginning, redo the foundation, and then put it back up, which is
well, I was suggesting how to do it. I'm not a construction person or developer. I was suggesting how you go about it.
Why not?
I mean, but we're going to have a lot of the things, since we're built out here, and all the residential that's going to go in will mostly require demolition of existing commercial structures. So you're saying that demolishing the parking lot, it's like, well, I mean, developers are going to be demolishing a lot of things. Okay, they already have, and most of the map, there's existing commercial on it. It's going to go away in most cases. They're not going to build on top of it. So demolition is just part of the cost, and what the implications of the demolition is something we deal with. So I'm not quite buying your argument, but listen, if I'm the only one that has an interest in this, that's fine. I just want to get it out.
Well, like a developer or a contractor, they would look for sites that are not being actively used, and then they, talk to the owner, and say, I'd like to redevelop this. This garage, I don't use the downtown as much as you do. You live there, but every time I've been by, that site is being used. It's actively used. Maybe not the top level, like you said, but the other 2 levels are actively used.
There's only 2 levels. The bottom level is mostly the people who live in the apartments, but so like half of it isn't being used. So I just think it's like when we talk about all the parking lots being open and unused. There's certain places where we see parking lots that are never filled. So I see a parking lot, it's never filled. That's all. It's like, it seems to me that again, I don't know what the reasons were. I didn't look at all the council meetings where they talked about it. And I know it's officially off the table, but since it was in the agenda, it was one item in the agenda on city-owned property and was not listed, I wanted to bring it up. Okay, So maybe I don't know if there's an appropriate different time to do this.
I just wanted to provide the chair and commissioner, you have some public speakers. When you get to that point, that have raised their hands. When you're ready for that.
Okay. Okay. I think that's all I had. Anybody else have any other questions, comments? All right.
So let's see, on page 5 at the bottom, it says that for park in lieu fees, you would have a net positive for reducing those. Can you just explain that a little bit more?
Certainly, it may be a way of viewing the fees. The concern being if you reduce fees, the city might see a reduction in the amount of money that will receive for the park program. But understanding the city may be unlikely to see the development of 100% affordable projects at all without a reduction in fees. You could see it as a net positive. The city would actually see park fees that it otherwise wouldn't even have from such a project.
Okay.
I actually did have one other question about the increase allowable density stuff. So when you give an example of 16 to 19% of VLI, and then you also mentioned something about example of for density goes up to 100% as an incentive for providing a mix of affordability types for like a 15% VLI plus 15% moderate. Are these applicable both to market rate development and 100% or high affordability developments? So if this 50% VLI and 50% moderate is that, are we talking about the rest of the other 70% being market rate? Is that typically what we're talking about?
That's correct.
Okay. And so we're assuming that there are developers who are willing to provide up to 30%, for example, 30% affordable within their development. Is that something that we know is
correct? The city's been approached by even developers pursuing 100% affordable housing projects. I mean, in this particular example, that state double density bonus law, that's targeting those developers who want to do, say, a 30% affordable housing project, comprising 15% very low, 15% moderates, 30% their overall project, the rest being market rate for 100% density bonus. So we don't want to conflict with that. So that's what our table stops where it does.
All right. Anybody else have any questions? Open it up for public. We got people online.
One person had their hand raised.
Jacob, you can speak.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Wonderful. My name is Jacob Billetary, and I'm a senior project manager with Charities Housing. Charities is an affordable housing developer based exclusively in Santa Clara County, and we focus on developing housing for folks at the lowest end of the income spectrum. So we focus on housing from 0 to 50% area median income. And we are actually in the early stages of working on a 100% affordable project in Campbell in collaboration with the Santa Clara Methodist Retirement Foundation. I wanted to be here this evening because I would love to be there in person. Unfortunately, I'm at a training because this affordable housing stuff is so difficult to fully wrap your head around. Broadly, we're very supportive of staff's recommendations. I think that they are a good step forward in addressing some of the issues created by the lack of public funds available in the city of Campbell. particularly at a time where state funding has gotten extremely competitive. If we're not able to get local funds for affordable housing, we have to go and compete for state funds, and state funds are oversubscribed 10x sometimes in certain application cycles. So this is very important for us. The park fee reduction is, I think, a particularly good step forward. We'll take any reduction we can get in those fees. The fees do provide leveraging advantages when we go and apply for state funding or for tax credits to finance 100% affordable deals. And it reduces total development costs, which is also helpful. And frankly, in my opinion, the money is better spent on services. If I'm going to reserve a certain amount of money in my pro forma, I would prefer to do it on services, because these developments are not only expensive and difficult to develop, but they serve vulnerable populations that need more services than a typical real estate development might. I also am supportive of the extended approvals. Given that the state funding environment is so competitive, the extra time on entitlements is very helpful for developments, particularly affordable developments. And finally, as somebody working in Campbell on a development right now, we're grasping at everything that we can to reduce costs, including exploring modular projects. And some of these cost reduction measures do make it difficult to comply with the design standards. So I'm also supportive of that provision of the staff recommendations as well. Thanks so much for giving me time to speak, and that's all I've got.
Anybody have any questions for Jacob? Jacob, are you free to talk about a little bit more about detail the development, or is it too early?
Well, we're still finalizing unit mixes. Broadly speaking, I think that we're going to focus on 30% area median income to 50% area median income. So it will be an ELI, VLI development. And we're currently exploring financing from a variety of different sources. This project we're particularly interested in contemplating as a modular construction because there's some financing opportunities that aren't typically available that might be made available to us if we can reduce our total development costs. And we would do that by using modular construction.
Do you have an idea how many units you're talking about?
It would probably be ballpark 100 units.
Thank you. I wish you luck.
Thank you.
You have anybody else? Okay, I'll close it. Done with this? Oh, we have to we have to have comments, right?
Discussion, yeah.
Discussion. Commissioner Fields.
Overall, just seems like really thoughtful ways of implementing the complementary proposal. I appreciate the explanation as well as I think learning tonight more about the 3 levels of housing and the gradation and why we're going after all 3. I have a slight bit of trepidation on the new proposed, like, allow 100% affordable with nothing but adjacency. This might be tired and it's late, but I sort of fear some total eyesore popping up somewhere in the city out of that. So I think I feel less strongly about that being a good idea compared to the other recommendations on the first 3, but the first 3 that staff's recommending feel great to me. So I'm very supportive of those being passed on to city council.
Yeah, I'm very supportive as well. I did have the same kind of questions come up in my mind about the lack of design review, but I'm very supportive. I think we definitely need this. We need to make this a more streamlined process and attract these projects. So.
I'm not terribly fussed about the reducing our design standards. If we wind up with a huge kind of blocky looking affordable housing tower and we have like 500 new affordable units, I'm not going to be fussed about that. Like, generally speaking, I would have liked to see us sort of boosting the existing density bonus program by making those approvals by right, but I understand that it's hard to do that without competing with the state density bonus program. So I'm glad that there's kind of a donut hole that we can add. We can lower the bar for getting ministerial or administrative approval, which I think is a really big deal. So I'm in favor of, I think staff has an excellent proposal. I really appreciate that you guys talked to a lot of developers and that you seem to have gone into a lot of details here. Like I would not have guessed a lot of the things that really matter, like the 3-year approval timeline. And I hope this is actually really useful. Yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah, no, I'm also in favor. I think I think Campbell's better for this. Yeah, I think we're trying, the goal is, getting more affordable housing, and I think we're pushing the envelope on that and trying to get it going, and I think we came up with some good proposals. Yeah, it's always a trade-off. We don't want to, throw design completely out the window. But I know that we are looking at the adjacency. We're being especially careful with the adjacency. So I think that's a nice plus. And on Commissioner Zister's item, now I do remember watching the city council meeting of way back when. And there was certainly at least one council member that was really dead set against the garage for housing. And I don't know why. I don't know if we got to the specifics or the science of it. For reasons that Commissioner Zister stated, I mean, we need city-owned sites is such a big plus. And the big drawback, one of the big drawbacks of that is the cost that Commissioner Kamkar mentioned. So, it's a little bit of a trade-off there. So maybe a different issue. I think at some point, if the trends are holding and the need for affordable housing just keeps growing and growing, that city garage is going to have to, come back up for consideration. But it seemed like the council was dead set against it. So. But I think we got a good proposal here. I like this. I'll be really interested to see what happens. I like that we got some good developer feedback. I wish a few of our other for-profit developers had given us a little more feedback that are active. I noticed a couple of them missing from the list of attendees there, but I think it's good. I think it's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think there is a reason why the city could not meet the previous affordable housing RHNA numbers that we were assigned, and that's because it is extremely hard, difficult to build affordable housing, mostly because of the numbers, because it doesn't pencil out. I admire Chair's insistence in, having more sites available. I just think that there is other ways to do it as well. If maybe instead of applying affordable housing standards to 15 units or more or 10 units or more, we apply to any new unit you build, you pay a little bit of money towards affordable housing. When money collects, it's the same as just giving them a site, because now you're giving them money to go buy a site, and be able to get that done. So I think staff's done a great job concentrating on this issue. It's the VLI is probably one of the most difficult, types of units to build, because it's because of the financials that are involved. Low income is the next hardest, and then the modest is the next hardest. So these are all have to do with money, and you know, I am in support of this, and I actually think it doesn't go far enough. I think, you know, we would be in, I would be in favor of going a little bit farther and every unit, you know, pay a little bit, you know, towards, don't exempt the regular market rate units from paying into the fund, and then using that fund to buy land and then give it to affordable housing, or just, you know, subsidize. So I'm in support of the staff's recommendation.
Sorry, can I bring one thing up real quick? So all of this is exempting our R1 areas. I believe we had a program in our housing element to establish an SB 10 program that would cover those. Are we planning on that coming up this year? Does that depend on the work plan, or we don't know yet?
Yeah, what I would say is part of the well, I'd say there's two parts to this. The first is we're working on completing enhancements to the recently adopted multifamily development design standards. First, taking into account observations of the submitted development projects. So as we're kind of working through those, the intent is to complete that update first. Our intention is to bring that back to the Planning Commission and Council this year. Following their completion, I would say that that's when we're going to be targeting streamlining and updates to our single family zone districts. I do know we are separately working on a comprehensive update to our municipal code, kind of again, more like kind of cleanups and other things are coming with that, which will account for additional changes to our single family or low density residential zoning districts to make some of our existing standards a little bit more objective. But again, the SB 10 would kind of follow both of those primary updates. We see this as like a, I'd say stage 3 kind of update in terms of the work plan.
Okay, thank you. That's very clear.
So yeah, I'm certainly, you know, it sounds like, you know, that the staff has put together a good, viable plan for this. And I'm certainly in favor of anything that will, you know, the concern about, you know, I guess reducing the adjacency issue. I'm less concerned about it, I suppose, than some others. But yeah, I would hope and keep my fingers crossed that the locations that are picked for, you know, the 100% affordable places will, you know, there'll be consideration taken into effect as to of adjacencies. If it turns out we're going to build a 6-story, an 8-story, or something like that, that would be in a place where it would make more sense not. But you know, I'm obviously a big proponent of trying to do our affordability. Affordability. I will disagree with you a little bit on why we haven't had affordables, because we haven't had laws that are forcing us to build more affordable in the past, and having accountability. And it is more difficult because most affordable, 100% affordable places are built by nonprofits, like folks from charities. And it's good to hear that there are people interested in Campbell, because we're competing, you know, because there's not a lot of nonprofit folks doing this, you know, in the state, and we're competing with a lot of other jurisdictions. So you know, I've said this before, and I'll say it again anyway, is that the math doesn't work if you don't get 100% or mostly some 100% affordable units built, because below market, if you get the 15 or 20%, supposedly you could get 30% of a market rate development, and our affordable number is about over 50% of our numbers, then you can't get it unless, you can't get the affordable numbers unless you have developments that are 50 to 100% affordable, which, you know, means mostly building 100% affordable, at least some of them. So the math doesn't work otherwise.
I mean, it would if you just built a lot more market rate.
Well, I'm assuming you're talking about exceeding our RETA numbers and yeah, you could, if you built 5,000 instead of 3,000, yeah, you'd make it, but that's probably not a reasonable assumption. I personally don't think. I think we'll be hard pressed to hit our numbers as they are. I mean, 8 years is not a very long time in the world of development. So I just, that's why I think it's important for us to really understand that if we can get people like Jacob's folks or Bode or Mid Peninsula or whomever else to come here and build in Campbell, that's what it's going to need to take to get affordable housing. So I'm in support of what we're doing here. And I guess at this point,
Can I ask one?
sure.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Steve. I hate to bring up, it's not a big subject, but I try to think fast. So the city does have an in lieu fee program right now.
City does. However, it's exceedingly limited. It only applies to very low, to low density residential projects. We've only had paid once.
Well, I was gonna ask what the city does with the money.
Yeah, so the city has only received that a single one-time payment as part of the Mozart project, Ropes Homes, and paid the fee. To my understanding, it had never been paid previously in the city's history. So it was just, it didn't even cover program administration, I don't believe, for the year.
I noticed that the developers were asking for expanding, or so that, which indicates we had a thing now, but I guess I would just say for the record that I have a negative bias to the in lieu fees because the developers have used those in other cities to really kind of get away from, you know, from building the units. Now, if it results in more units for all of us, that's fine, but for a city of Campbell, which we don't have really the, you know, the wherewithal, we're not doing too many projects. We just hired our first housing manager. You know, we're not a big city doing big projects. So, you know, I know that we're putting off the in lieu fee. I think that's good. I think it's worth a good study, but I just don't want to leave, those fees shouldn't be too low like they are almost everywhere else. And we should use it really, I think, hesitantly, but that's just my opinion, and it's probably going to come up for future discussions. So, thank you.
So continue with that thought. Can we use the in lieu fee if it actually got off the ground as our matching, so that they could use this matching fund and get state and federal funds? Can it be done to that?
Yes.
Okay. So it may be able to get some good use, maybe not enough to build a house by itself, but as a matching to qualify for this.
Just to remind the commission, the structure Stephen proposed, since we don't have funds now, it would be a reduction in park fees. The idea is once we build funds and we can subsidize or match projects to work, you wouldn't get both. You're not reducing the park fees and giving them the subsidy. You can come back to those decisions in the future, but the idea is now the park fee reduction is because we can provide that funding.
Are we good, everybody? All right. I guess we need a motion.
Yeah, I'll make the motion that the planning commission recommend that the city council adopt an ordinance establishing a new zoning map incorporating 3 new housing overlay, combining zoning districts and adoption of related zoning code text amendments.
Was there an additional thing?
I just did want to get clarity on one particular point as part of the motion, is whether or not the planning commission was supportive of the addition of allowing for 100% affordable projects to be alleviated from development requirements, accepting the adjacency standards. If that is something you'd like to have added to the motion, you need to make that clear.
I would add that to the motion, what Stephen just said. It's just a big item, but I think it's.
I wouldn't, but I accept a voting body of 7, so.
Okay, second. Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Commissioner Gray and a second by Commissioner Cancard. Can we take a vote?
Commissioner Fields? We're voting on the whole thing.
Yes.
Aye.
Commissioner Richardson?
Aye.
Commissioner Buckbinder?
Aye.
Commissioner Crave?
Aye.
Vice Chair Duncan?
Aye.
Chair Caesar?
Aye. It's passed. Okay, Director Eastwood. You have a development director report for us?
It's super quick tonight. I just want to report actions of the council. This was actually last night. They had a special meeting. They did not hold a meeting on the first Tuesday of this month. They just had one meeting this month, which was last night. They did review an item that came before you before. This is a 6-lot subdivision on Sunnyside. Not sure if you remember that. And that did go forward and get approved. There was some discussion on dedications, but the staff recommendation, Plan Commission went forward as approved to council. Second item that went forward, this is Sal Caruso, a proposed duplex on Kennedy. You might remember this came before you. That also went forward to the council. A lot of discussion on that resolved around actually a dedication on the right of way and improvements to the sidewalk. Council gave some direction on some modifications to that. There was a lot of input by Public Works. They did continue that hearing for staff to go off and do some modification to conditions. So they'll come back to council, but generally the council was supportive of the item. Nothing else to report, except for we are now recruiting for a plan check examiner. So the whole point of this, our building official has to do all the plan checks now and inspectors. It's gonna be a dedicated person that really helps with the throughput, someone dedicated to reviewing building permits that come in. So key to our operations, I'll just say, if you know folks who are skilled in plan checking and want to work for the beautiful city of Campbell, please spread the word. So, nothing additional. Yes.
Is that because we're getting more building permit applications, or we expect to?
The answer is yes and yes. Yeah, the trends have gone up over the past couple of years. We did a change in our valuations rates to make them more industry standard. They actually were lower the past couple of years, so we weren't taking as much revenue, whereas most cities I know had a higher valuation rate that's been adjusted to pay for the positions to review those. But in direct answer to your question, Commissioner Buckmeyer, the building permit trends have gone up over the past couple of years. We anticipate them continuing right now in the housing market. The high density residential is not happening. We have zoned for a lot of high density, but because of the interest rate so high in supply chain, those projects are not moving forward. We do get a fair amount of townhome projects and some other projects moving forward. But overall permits have gone up in the past years. Yes, sir.
Director, in your opinion, do you think we're on track to meet our RENA numbers in 8 years?
Well, I'll just say this, and there's a APR report that will come to you later on. We can have a discussion more fully, I think. We do have 100% affordable housing projects in the pipeline. So that's a first for Campbell. That's a game changer. What you saw in the last 8 years was lower density projects in one tool, 50% inclusionary housing ordinance. So we do have 200% affordable projects. We are trying to roll out the new tools. The one you have tonight will have the Nexus study for commercial linkage fees and modifications to inclusionary housing ordinance coming before you. That being said, we put a lot of investment into higher density development. These are areas like Fry's and the Prune Yard. And again, because of the development market right now, those projects are not moving forward. So more to come if those market conditions are kind of challenging things.
So out of the 8 years, we have 1 year has gone by, right? We've had 7 years left in the cycle, correct?
In April, we'll hit our 1 year mark of being adopted and certified in first city in this county.
Right.
Okay, before I adjourn the meeting, I'm just gonna make a statement. So it wasn't an agenda, but I guess I think I could make a statement without discussion. allow you to think about things. I know you've been in great anticipation to know whether or not I'm interested in subcommittees. So, so here's my take as chair. We have one of the subcommittees that Adam had headed up is on the back burner, and that's the one on parking, and that's going to be on the back burner. I think we've agreed they'll be on the back burner until there's a new work plan, which I think comes up in June. And if it coincides with the work plan, then we can pursue it further. At least that's my take on it. As far as other subcommittees, I'm in tune with staff's position of if we were to do subcommittees, that they should be tied to the work plan. Since the new work plan isn't until comes out for the next fiscal year at the end of June, we don't know what that new work plan is going to be, so we would need to kind of wait on that for any new subcommittees, except for the fact that we do have an existing work plan. But the only item on the existing work plan that I can see, there's a housing assistant section that talks about the housing program. And there's also the Nexus study, but and there's something about identifying broader BMR housing program upgrades. So I guess what I would like to do is I don't want to be the dictator. Okay. To me, it's like if any of the commissioners has an idea for a subcommittee that's relevant, that we believe could be within our purview, then I would suggest submitting it to me with an explanation and then I would take a look at it, possibly and talk to Rob, and sometime in the next, during this period prior to the next work plan, I would only see the possibility maybe of coming up with some relevant, one relevant subcommittee that people would be, that the commission would be agreeable to. And I would throw it out to the commission to approve it rather than me designating it. My personal interest is housing and affordable housing. So if there was something that we could do to support, that we could support the staff in some way in terms of research towards some implementation in that area, I would personally be interested in it. But I don't know what that is. So I just throw it out to the commission for you guys to think about it over the next few weeks or month. And don't feel rushed to send, there's no deadline. So if anybody has an idea, please feel free to email me. And I'll leave it at that. Otherwise, I'll adjourn the meeting. 10 o'clock. Right at 10. Or the next meeting is